Hi, I'm Peter Travers, movie critic for Rolling Stone, and I'm here to talk about what's there at the movies. And what's there at the movies is one thing: Watchmen. Every kind of anticipation is directed at this movie. Every major studio has stayed away from releasing anything against it, and for good reason. So you're looking at me and you're saying, how was it? Was it awesome? Was it awful? And I have to say, quite honestly, it's both awesome and awful. How does that work? Well, let me start with some good stuff. The awesome part of it is that Zack Snyder, the director, the guy who gave us 300, really loved what Alan Moore did with this graphic novel in the 1980s. Loved it. And what Dave Gibbons did as the illustrator. He, in fact, is so in love with it that if there's a fault in what he's done is that he stayed too faithful to everything that went on in this. But how do you really knock him for that? I mean, he's made a movie that's nearly 3 hours long, that deals with all the characters in Watchmen. He went with an R rating, which when you spend $125 million to make a graphic novel, a comic book movie, is a lot of money to make back. What about the people out there who know nothing of this graphic novel, don't know any of the characters, who wouldn't know Dr. Manhattan from their own doctor that they go to when they're sick? This is a real risk that was taken here. And I see drool at the multiplex. I see crap all the time where no risk is taken. I'm not going to start knocking Beverly Hills Chihuahuas and Paul Blart. So just, okay, I'm off of that from the beginning. But I want to say, just to set it up a little bit, that Watchmen is set in 1985. Richard Nixon is on his 5th term as President of the United States. So, okay, we're in an alternate universe here. And in an amazing credit sequence, we see what has gone on in the 80s. We see that Nixon has won the war in Vietnam by getting Dr. Manhattan, played by Billy Crudup, a physicist who had a terrible nuclear accident and is now all blue and all glowing, including the penis. I mean, this guy has the giant blue wiener of all time in movies. And so you're going to have to look at that and say, what's this, a giant camp fest? No, this is dark. This is something that's as dark as The Dark Knight was. I mean, look at the character Jackie Earle Haley plays. He's Rorschach. This is a vigilante. This is a man who wears a kind of cheesecloth over his head, and ink blots move back and forth depending on what he's doing. When I say violent, Rorschach is a guy that was not just a vigilante superhero. He was abused as a child, and there's a scene in this movie that takes the R rating to its absolute heights. It's him with a cleaver smashing a pedophile into pieces. And listen, you want to take a date to this movie? Maybe the date's not going to like it. Maybe the date's going to hate you. But I'm saying, when I talk about the performance of Jackie Earle Haley, the performance of Billy Crudup as Dr. Manhattan, great work, haunting work, true to the novel. What doesn't really work about this is that when you stay true to the novel, you have what Alan Moore, the guy who wrote it, said was, it's not a movie. When you look at a frame in a comic book, and there's usually 9 panels on it, it's not the same as watching a movie. In that frame, I could see details. I could see a book on the table. I could see that somebody's watching The Outer Limits. You can't do that in a movie because it moves too fast, so it's not the same thing. Unless, of course, you want to go back and see the movie over and over again. And I know there's going to be a lot of you out there that will do it. You know, Alan Moore took his name off of this. He hated how Hollywood screwed up V for Vendetta. I actually like V for Vendetta, so I don't agree with him there. But they definitely screwed up the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, and he's angry about that. So he said, my name is not here, and yet his spirit is in this movie. So I'm saying, despite its faults, and there are many, it's worth seeing. You should see it. So this is the time where I turn to the scumbucket part of the review and say, what bad movie is out there? No, I've got to put some stuff in Watchmen and toss it into the scumbucket with all these other bad movies that have come out. All these horrible chick flicks, all the bad dog movies, they're going to have to welcome this. So who's bad in this movie? Well, what's really bad is the whole love story between a character called Night Owl 2, played by Patrick Wilson, and his girlfriend, Silk Spectre 2, played by Malin Ackerman, who I think is the poor man's Cameron Diaz. This woman cannot say a line, But I'll start with Patrick Wilson and say that Night Owl 2 is a guy because all superheroes have been outlawed. This is a bad thing now in 1985. We don't want them anymore. They've gotten a little crazy. People forget this when they talk about what Watchmen meant. The line that goes, "Who's watching the Watchmen?" is important because Alan Moore and this movie believe that vigilante superheroes are no good. They go nuts on you. And they're saying to you, look at the world now. Look at what's happening in economic ruin, and look at how the federal government is taking over at this period. Everything. You've got to watch the people who are saying they're out there to save you. This isn't a superhero movie where we're all going, yay, Superman, yay, X-Men. We're not saying yay to these people. This is a really depressing, melancholy look at how bad these superheroes can be. And Patrick Wilson is a guy who hasn't been a superhero for years. As written, he's a character who's gotten pudgy. This guy should have been played by Philip Seymour Hoffman. Instead, he's played by Patrick Wilson, who's a good-looking guy in the extreme. What's up with that? Why was Zack Snyder not thinking when he cast him in the role? Malin Ackerman as Silk Spectre is insanely awful. She's got the latex on. She says lines like, "Oh, I think there's going to be nuclear war," as if she was also saying, "I need to make a nail appointment."
John thinks that there's going to be nuclear war.
What? It just takes the tone of the movie and throws it into the gutter, or what I would call the scum bucket. This is bad stuff in a movie that should have known better, especially someone who's so faithful to it. Now, I know you're going to argue with me. We're going to talk about the sex scenes in this movie, and not just the guy with the blue penis, Dr. Manhattan, but the fact is he creates two clones of himself to satisfy Silk Spectre. That should have been hotter. That should have been a more interesting scene. Instead you go, And then the big sex scene between Night Owl 2 and Silk Spectre 2, where they are in this little ship and they, please, it's like some bad James Bond movie. Doesn't work at all. What I want to do is to hear from you. You know, we have this new feature, Ask Travers at rollingstone.com. Tell me if you think I'm crazy. Tell me what you think belongs in the scum bucket, or tell me you don't think anything belongs in the scum bucket. But we're going to be talking about this movie for a while. I know it, you know it. I'm Peter Travers.